Okay, hi, welcome everybody, and it's lovely to be here yet again. And it's going to be a quite whizzy tour through all things vocal. And in a moment we'll be looking at the sheets that you've got, and if you haven't got a sheet we'll deal with that as the time comes closer, which talks about vocal ingredients and what you will need to think about and how your voice is now. We're going to be looking at some of the risks that you might be facing vocally. You probably didn't think that was a problem when you walked in the door, but teachers are actually, if you go to speech therapists, they see 25% of the people that they see are teachers, and that's if you can get to a speech therapist, because there aren't enough of them. And in fact, if any of you decide this isn't for you, could you all please go and train to be speech therapists? You'll love it. Okay. We're going to look at the vocal mechanics, what goes on actually, because what happens is when you're speaking, you get a biological sensation of what's happening and you think you know what you're doing. And then there are all sorts of little videos out there on YouTube that say, oh yes, here's my 5 tips for speaking really well in public, and here's this, that and the other. And they're all quite bitty. So what I'm going to do today is draw some of that together, but make it entirely relevant for the classroom, because you're in a very specific situation being classroom teachers. And if you're outdoors as well, by the way. So, you know, those of you that work in PE and things and are working outdoors, you're using your voices in an even more risky way, potentially. We're going to look at impedances, how you get in the way of your voice without realizing it. And then vocal health generally, how you can best look after your voice, and some strategies for moving forward with that. So here's how I became vocally empowered. I started off as a head of music when in my 20s. I know I had dark hair there and I look about 2. Mind you, so do the students around me. Honestly, once we had a mufti day. This is very early days of mufti day, and I happened to wear the same colours that were the sixth form colours in the school, which I hadn't sort of clocked. And then it was a really interesting experience, actually, because I was only 22 and, you know, 23, and I got bashed around in the corridor because they didn't know I was a teacher yet. And it was so interesting that they thought I was just another student, a sixth former. And it was a really different perspective to have. Anyway, I taught for about 5 years over in Buckinghamshire, and then I left to become a singer. And that's me a couple of weeks ago singing in a concert, giving it my all, as you can see, in a church. So I left teaching and I went to music college, Guildhall, if anybody is interested. But these are all the things that subsequently I've used my knowledge on voice for. So what happened was, as a teacher, I learned how to be present in the classroom. I learned how to manage people, or not manage them sometimes. I learned how to keep my voice going. And then as a singer, I learned really about performances and audiences and dealing with things at the last minute. Mind you, that's often what you have to do as a teacher. So these are all transferable skills. I used to take a choir. It was called Mamma Vox. There I am with them at the top. And I now do choir sessions around the country. I go and work with choirs to make them sing in a more blended way, help them sort out their voices. Because, of course, I'm a singing teacher as well. I teach at a major public school, as it happens. I've been doing my voice training with Talking Voice. I set that up in 2007. And that was all my singing friends used to say to me, sorry, all my teacher friends still said, how could you go and sing an opera and then go to the pub and still talk? Well, that's what singers do, you know. But it was a really interesting thought, and subsequently I started looking at how many teachers needed some help, and then I decided I should be paid for giving that information. I present a radio show for my sins. Now that's a very different thing again, because this is close mic'd, and I'm all about projection of the voice, as you can tell. So I had to learn, I do it every week, and I have to learn with a microphone here and a pop shield in front of it to say, and I'm really excited about this piece of Beethoven, without going, I'm really excited. So, you know, it's a change of voice use. That was really useful for me to think about. I give masterclasses in various places. People come and stand and sing. I could do it today. I could just, you know, somebody comes up and sings and I'll tell you how to improve your communication of text and your communication of the song, whether you're singing music theatre or opera. And finally, on the far left, at the bottom, I started in lockdown. I became a celebrant because I lost all my concerts, lost all my work. And for when I came out of lockdown, I did quite a bit of training. Within that time as well, I also did emotional intelligence training and neuro-linguistic programming. So I got myself certificated up in those. And some of you will have come across NLP, I'm sure. Now, why are you at risk? Okay, so that's just a little overview of what can go wrong and what happens when people end up in speech therapy. These are the things that they talk about and that speech therapists will mention. Now, I'm a great believer that prevention is better than cure. So today is going to be about trying to prevent you from getting to that stage. But you've done a term in school. You might already have experienced some of the voice issues that could be plaguing you for the rest of your career if you're not careful. And the thing is, because you're quite robust probably at the moment, you can get away with it. And when you're younger, you get away with it. But over a period of years, building, if you don't change something, suddenly your voice will say, I can't do this anymore. And that's kind of what happened to me. So I've been there, and after about 20 years of singing, I suddenly thought, I don't want to go and sing, don't want to go and do this audition. I don't feel I'm singing my best. Sometimes it'd be great, sometimes it wouldn't. I couldn't make that call. And actually what happened was when we eventually looked at it, I eventually agreed to have a voice operation, which is usually a big no-no if you're a singer. And it was only when I came round from it, the surgeon said to me, do you know what, that would never have got better. You were vocal cord hemorrhaging. Now, that's what Adele had, by the way. And I think Sam Smith might have had it, but I don't want to sort of put that out there. But there's a few singers recently that I've heard about that have, but like 0.02% of singers get vocal cord hemorrhaging. And it's not because you're doing something wrong, it's just the way, the nature of your voice. It might not be quite as robust. Interestingly, I did my best singing following that surgery. So in fact, my technique was fine. It was just that my vocal cords were not great. But that had happened when I was a teacher. The surgeon said to me, you know, that's been going on for many years by the looks of your vocal cords. And somehow I'd got away with it, but I got to the stage where I couldn't. And I'm here to say that if you ever end up needing some very serious vocal intervention, it is not the end of the world. But it is a signal that you have to then change what you do, which Adele didn't. And then how many excuses have we had for not doing concerts and not being out there and not recording stuff? And my gut feeling is that it's because her voice, poor girl, is now so compromised she daren't put it out there, which is a real shame because actually with a bit of training she could have done. So vocal ingredients, what are they? How many things make up your voice? Well, you've got them in front of you and you're going to do a little bit of chatting in a minute. But here they are, the dynamics, the loudness at which you use your voice. Do you change it under different circumstances? I would hope that you do, because it would be really inappropriate to, having been outside, to come in and still yell at the same level in the classroom, and it would actually be knackering on your voice too. The speed at which you talk, you'll have all been told probably to slow it down a bit. And of course the thing is you can do that, and then when you get really relaxed and excited about something, it speeds up again. So you have to constantly monitor or learn to have a habit of speaking in a much slower manner. The pitch at which you speak. I was saying yesterday to the primary school people that the people very much at risk are primary school female teachers because they talk like that. And the children really respond to that kind of voice. And actually what happens is they're now speaking, they've elevated their larynx and they're putting their larynx into a position to keep higher pitch talking. And if they are not aware of that and come back down to their normal pitch, they then put a strain eventually through the larynx. Expression is really important if you want to keep people listening. Because actually what happens is that people tend to talk, as soon as they start to project their voice and make it louder, can hear what's happening, they kind of go into there because they haven't done anything else. They've just talked louder. And that's not the same thing. So you've got to know a little bit about what goes on inside your mouth and the bits that you can move around to make that more interesting and more expressive. And if you're reading something out, even if it's, I don't know, some set of rules or something, try and make them interesting. There's no reason for them to be dull just because they're a set of rules. Tempo, oh, we've got tempo twice. That's interesting. I didn't notice that yesterday. Well, it's obviously an important thing. Tone, the way that the tone of your voice is all done to do with your physiognomy. What the shape of your face is, the internal shape of your mouth, where your tongue, teeth, everything, just the shapes of all those things make the difference between your tone and then how you enact the voice. Pacing is also about, sometimes some people talk like this and they just keep going and then they just talk like this and they carry on and then everybody's having to listen and catch up really hard because actually it's quite hard to listen and process that when nobody takes a breath or takes a little gap. You see what I mean? So some people talk in a constant stream because they feel like that's really motoring. It's far more helpful if you break that up for your listener. They will then be able to hear bits and process what they need to. So never be, but it feels to you, it's going to feel too slow and it's going to feel too gappy, but it isn't. The timbre is again about the tone, the colour of your particular voice and the energy with which you speak. At the end of the day, it's so much harder, isn't it, to keep that excited, interested energy than it is at the beginning of the day. Or it might be that you're very tired at the beginning of the day and you're much better at the end of the day. Your energy starts to rise. So it's about you and what you're like. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to work in groups of 4 or 5. So you'll turn your chairs around. And I'm going to give you 5 minutes to chat with the sheet here, and if you haven't got one, we'll give you I've got some spares here, about what I've just said and what's happening with your voice right now. What you're doing, what you notice about your voice, what things you think you should be taking from this session. Everybody needs to think of taking 2 or 3 things from this session so that there's something you can work on in future. So can you get together in your groups of 4 or 5 and then I'll call you back in 5 minutes. Okay, thank you. Actually, what I should have said a little bit earlier was I'd like you to put away your laptops or just close them. You are not going to need to take notes in this session. I want you to be very present and engaged and attentive in this session, and you're going to be doing things anyway. You're not going to need it. I will provide a PDF of the slides afterwards. Unless you've been listening, some of them won't make any sense anyway. But you know, and you can always ask more about the session. Anyway, there will be this wonderful video for you to access later. So just something we did yesterday, and I forgot to mention it earlier, so thank you for that. Okay, I'd like some feedback on what you were talking about and what you feel was important, or maybe a revelation or something that was so obvious you're thinking, oh yes, this definitely happens. Not necessarily to you, but what you've noticed in other people, but it can be about things that happen to you. So I'm going to start in this half of the room. Can somebody just stick their hand up and say something about the sheet? It's lovely when you do that and nobody... Right, there you go. Thank you. Being brave.
We spoke about tempo.
Aha.
So sometimes if you get really excited, well, we actually spoke about a lot of different things, but I'm just going to speak about tempo. But when you get really excited about a particular topic, like a subject or something that you're teaching, and then all of a sudden your voice kind of goes really, really fast, and then the kids can't follow along, and then you have to slow it down again, and you have to repeat it, and then it kind of becomes a consistent pattern.
That's like. Thank you. So we had a comment about the speed at which you talk, and we had a lovely version of actually talking quite fast as you went through it, and saying how that the students can't follow after a while if you're going too fast. And also I think you did a nice demonstration there, because you were talking to me, about just keeping going and not making many gaps. That kind of goes with the tempo thing, that pacing thing. Thank you for that. Right, in this block, somebody's... Yes?
About different tones, and I had a revelation where in like my year 7s I have quite an assertive different tone, and then key stage 4, like my year 10s and 11s, I don't necessarily have the same tone. It's a lot more relaxed, and I think sometimes behaviour can play into that maybe a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And so it's a bit of a symbiotic thing, because if you suddenly feel that your class is slipping away from you, and there's going to be more in the year 7 as well than by the time you get to the choices, the GCSE choices. So, you know, you can feel, so you start to panic slightly. I know I did. And that just puts a slight edge on my voice. And if I'm not careful, then the message that gives out is one of slight aggression. And so it's a really careful balancing thing that you need to know. I'm going to talk to you about finding the balanced voice. That's the voice I'm speaking to you with now. It's got a firm enough quality, but hopefully it's not too aggressive. It's quite inviting. You're not threatened by me. If everything was going a little bit awry, I might just go to what I call my firm voice, which is that. But I don't want to end up speaking like that all the time, because actually very quickly that can become a bit of a shout. So very well observed, because that is probably something you want to have a look at and see if you can bring some of your more relaxed mode into your year 7, and then see what behaviour happens. Be really interesting, but you have to have, my goodness, as a teacher you need to have all these different aspects of voice at your command. And we're going to do something on commanding of the voice in a moment. Thank you for that. How about in this row, somebody from here? Got somebody at the back there. Go on, I looked at you. Well done, on cue, sir.
We spoke about energy, so being in PE, you need to give a lot of energy to the kids so that they stay on task and sort of give every bit that they can. If you go with quite a slow voice, not very much energy, then they're going to pick up on that and probably not try as hard as they probably could.
Possibly. So yes, I mean, is that something you've observed?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So you're right in terms of if you're trying to galvanise students, if you're doing games or something, or actually modern foreign language teachers have this as well. They're really trying to galvanise people into being interested. Then everything gets a little faster paced, and the energy that you present in there. The trouble with having that energy is once you set off on it, you kind of can't get out of it. And you get more and more, and it gets faster and actually it's exhausting. So you need to find times as well when you can bring that level down, keep the interest, but make the energy still there, but in a quieter way. So you might want to look at that a little bit. Just worth an experiment to try and see, and maybe with different age ranges as well. It's very different depending which age range you're talking with. Thank you, that was a really interesting point. Somebody from this galaxy of faces in front of me here? I'll pick somebody. One. There you go, thank you very much.
Again, talking with pitch, I'll notice that, say for example, if I'm in a little bit more of a challenging situation, then I will notice my pitch going higher, higher, and higher and higher like that, and I have to deliberately stop myself and then bring it back down, because otherwise I'll sound like an absolute mouse.
Okay, so yes, so actually, of course, you've got quite a wide pitch range there from which you can go. So actually, there's no harm in using some of those different levels of pitch, the different, literally the different levels. But you're right, if you're getting higher and higher, and it all starts to sound a little bit manic. And so then you're right, and when you do that, what you may do and you may not recognize is that you will breathe. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. You take a breath and you reset. And that's something that you're going to need to put into your arsenal of things that you're going to do. It's about resetting the voice so that you're in control of it again. So thank you for that. Right, I'm going to introduce you to Jo S. Still. And we're going to do something with her work in a second. Jo S. Still, some of you, if you've done music theatre and singers, you will have heard of Jo S. Still, or the S. Still method. There is no such thing as the S. Still method, although there's quite a lot of people making a lot of money, I wish I was doing it, out there teaching the S. Still method. Jo S. Still was an American singer. And she sang music theatre, and she was doing lots of belty, big singing in the, over the course of her career. She was born 1921, so in the 1940s, she was doing most of her big work. By the 1960s, when she was about 40, she found her voice was wrecked. And she didn't know what to do about it, and she didn't know why that had happened. After all, she'd been able to do it 10 years ago. Why? What I was saying earlier, of course, why couldn't she do it now? It happened to be at the time in the 1960s when fibre optic cameras were being invented. And for the first time, and there's a really slightly gory video on YouTube of a fibre optic camera on television. They put it on a television show going down a singer's throat, or maybe going up their nose and then dangling down at the back, so that you can then see the vocal cords, because the vocal cords are well protected and they're down here. This doesn't look very far, but in internal body space it's miles. So if you're sort of trying to see from up here what's going on there, that's quite a way. And we're going to look at, by the way, just a forewarning, we are going to see a video of vocal cords later on. So what she discovered then was that what she felt she was doing with her voice and all the biological feedback she was getting wasn't necessarily what the vocal cords were doing or anything around that area was doing. And it was all a bit of a surprise. And actually, she's been incredibly important in terms of our knowledge and our understanding about voice. Because you can't see it. I can't go, oh, let me just have a look at your voice. And a doctor, by the way, cannot just put a mirror to the back of your throat and see your vocal cords. They're too far down and too protected. You need specialist equipment. So if you go to a doctor and he says, oh yeah, your vocal cords are looking, hopefully they wouldn't say that. They're lying because they can't see your vocal cords. They might see something about, in this bit of this might be inflamed up here or troubled because your vocal cords are having a crisis. You need to get to specialist people. So when you go to the doctor, you ask for a referral to an ear, nose and throat specialist. So Jo Still discovered, by the way, while she was doing this, that there were 6 qualities of voice that everybody in the world can do. Universal voice qualities. One of them is speech. That's called the modal equality. I don't think we need to do that. However, I thought that we would sing Happy Birthday. It's the only time I'm going to ask you to sing in this session. And we would do it according to my instruction. So the first way of singing it is anybody's birthday here today? She says. They're not going to admit to it now. Anyway, so you can sing happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you. You can do you all the time. But if it's your birthday, you'll know that we're secretly singing to you. So we're going to do the naughty child. So this is, you know, when you get people that go, na, 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 na. That sort of teasing child in the playground. So we're going to sing it like happy birthday, like this, okay? Here we go. Bring out your inner naughty child. 1, 2. Happy birthday to you. Happy, come on. Hey to you. More nasal. Birthday to you. Happy birthday. There's an awful lot of laughing there. All right. Now I'd like you to bring out your best opera voice. So this is where you take the, you decide that you're going to emulate somebody like me, what you think I'm doing when I sing to produce the noise that I do produce. So bring out your opera. Whenever I do this, I see people go and sitting up and just clearing their throats, like, because they know this is a big moment. So let's raise the roof with a happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. It can be better than that, come on. Bring your voice out, it's pathetic. Oh, you, really go. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Oh dear, I tell you what, yesterday, my primary school teachers totally went for it. It was really loud. That was very nice. It was nice. You're all singing in tune. That's astonishing. Right. Okay, right. So now you've been at a party. It's a bit raw. Maybe you're leaving this party now. You're in the street. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, but you don't give a flying anything about that. So you're going to sing happy, you've had a great time. Okay, here we go. And happy birthday to you. Yeah, keep going. Happy birthday to you. Here we go. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Did you notice how you get to the end, you all sort of get nicer and the whole, you start out, that's actually that's group mentality working exactly there. When you work in a group, you'll eventually end up coming to a central line. You notice that when you're working with students. If you get them to do any vocalising, they will end up being quite tuneful and quite nice. Right, now let's do a whiny one. So happy, so a bit whiny, a bit, here we go, and happy birthday to you, happy birthday, do you breathe in between, who are you, happy birthday to me, happy birthday to you. Now, when you were out in the street making that noise, somebody opened the window and gave you what for, and then you got all upset because that was not fair, and he was going to have a party, and now it's all been ruined. So I now want you to sing happy birthday in a sobbing way. Happy birthday to you. That sort of way. Here we go. And happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday to you. I sort of have a feeling that I'm just entertaining you here. Okay, and the final one is modal, is speech. Now, Joe gave these particular names. Some of them are the same, some of them are slightly different. So the naughty child is twang. Actually, it's such an American term, isn't it? But my husband hates it as a term for some reason. But it's actually to do with the nasal quality in your voice. And you have 3 pharynxes. Do you know what a pharynx is? Anybody tell me what a pharynx is? Nope. Nice though. Thank you for offering that. It's the space. It's the space around muscles. It's the space. So you have a laryngeal pharynx, space behind your larynx, an oropharynx. This is the important one. That's the bit when you had to do your COVID test and you tried to avoid hitting the back of your throat. That's your oropharynx. Okay. That's the bit that stretches when you yawn. So you can move that, and then you have a nasal pharynx. A really good public speaker, singer, connects all those three chambers up as if it were one. So they don't sort of isolate any one or other bits. So in other words, they use the whole thing. Funnily enough, Tracy mentioned being embodied. We are talking about the voice being embodied, and that's so much more authentic and so much more real for everybody. So one of the chambers is up here in this nasal pharynx. So the twang is where you use a nasal pharynx. But obviously you don't want to sound like that, because that perhaps wouldn't be really helpful. So you use that, but you open up the back as well. So here's me in my normal voice. It's got lower because I'm older. Voice gets lower as you get older. So this is my normal conversational speaking voice, but that's going to be wrecked if I try and project that. So what I do is I elevate the pitch slightly and I start using my twang. I've been doing that since the beginning of this session, which is how come hopefully you can all hear me. So twang is just using a little bit of nasal resonance. If you don't have enough of your other pharynx lifted, you get what Joe Brand has got, and there's actually a term for it. It's called pharyngeal insufficiency, and it means so it talks like that. So it's when the pharynx comes down, and Craig Revel-Horwood does it sometimes, and he deliberately does it in Strictly, darling, fabulous. He does this, and what he's done is he's closed down and only used the nose. So that's just a little bit of extra information. The opera sound, really obvious. That's your Shakespearean actor. So when you hear actors in the theatre and they're talking like this, they're using quite a lot of their body to make that sound, but that is your operatic speaking voice. And you might find that useful sometimes, depending what subject you're teaching. Belt is the raucous party. In singing, it's the easiest way to describe it. It's when you do this. That's belt. And actually, I'm going to go from belt to opera, from belt to opera, because I'll show you that it's not a different voice I'm using, and I won't take a breath. So it's the same vocal cords doing the same thing. They aren't changing. What is changing is the shape of my vocal tract above it. This is like, I look at your faces, it's like going, oh yeah, oh, go on, do that then. So here we go. So go, hey. You hear the difference? So what that is literally when I go wide, I've raised my larynx, although I haven't actively done that, and also the top of my mouth has flattened out. So it's a bit like an envelope. When I go to opera, I sort of squidge it back again so you get the shape that way, a lengthy shape. So it's using more of the vocal tract, whereas this is very much face-based. Okay? And then falsetto, that's the kind of whiny one. That's where you only use a little bit of the voice. It's very tiring to use falsetto unless you are a countertenor and you've worked out how to use that. I need a man to demonstrate this. It's one of you men. They all try and make themselves look as small as possible at this moment. So can somebody do what I can only best describe as your lady voice, where you use the high voice to talk with? Can one of the boys do that? Have a go. Anything you like, just go, oh, here's me using my high voice. Oh, here's me using my high voice. Perfect. Thank you so much. There we go, exactly. So that's falsetto, and what's happening there is that the chords are coming together, but they're only just approximately meeting. So actually, women do have a falsetto, you know, when you try and sing and then you can't go any higher and you go into a different voice. So when you go, ah, ah, that's falsetto, but that's not a strong vocal use, okay? And then finally, we have the sob, which is really obvious. So why does all that matter? Well, you know, as a teacher, and using your voice 24/7, so you don't just use it for teaching, you go home and you use it, then you try and use it at weekends. If you've wrecked your voice during the week, you aren't going to have it for weekends, and you're going to spend your whole weekend recovering, and then you're going to start again on the Monday, and then thank God we get to half term, because suddenly you get a week off, and that's longer than a weekend, so thankfully you get more chance, and by the end of half term, your voice is fine. So you think, oh, I made that up. I'm fine. It's just a question of stamina, a little bit of stamina, which it is. But it's about technique as well. And as I say, at the moment, none of you, unless you've already started happening, know whether you've got a strong voice or not, whether you've got a robust voice or not. So my best advice to you is assume that you're going to need some technique in your voice to keep you going, longevity in your career. So warm-ups, I bet none of you think, or maybe some of you do, but really it's not going to be the first thing in your mind to do. And yet you are using these muscles like we saw at an Olympic level. So if you are wanting to keep the voice working longer in the day with more of the technique and efficiency, then you should be doing some warm-ups. You know, it wakens up your body. It tells the muscles that we're ready to work here. It wakens up your mind. It gets your mind focused on things. It increases your stamina over time. Somebody from last year's cohort I discovered yesterday had a little tricky moment coming into her second placement. She did this session and she thought, actually, I could use some of that. I'm going to just do some warm-ups. So she sort of took some of the things that I did, and she did the warm-ups every day, just for 5-10 minutes. And it made a huge difference. I'm so thrilled about this. It made a huge difference, not only to her vocal ability, but to her confidence as well. Because suddenly she thought, there's something I can do, and I can make that work for me. And it was something different, and it was almost like her secret ingredient that nobody knew about, and it made all the difference. So if you're sitting there having a few problems now, this might be something that you want to think about too. Acts like a brain gym. It sets up muscle memory, and I'm going to give you an exercise in a minute that will help you determine how healthy your voice is feeling on any one day in particular. And what gets in the way just before we do that? Body tensions. If you stand and you've got your knees locked, if I lock my knees now, actually I can feel the pressure here already. Sorry, Phil. I can feel the pressure on my chest, and it's gone right straight to my vocal cords. That's why I'm always moving around. I don't ever stay still at the front of the classroom. I move. Actually, one of the things I discovered early on was that if I went to the back of the classroom, I did one day on my journeying around, and everybody turned, because you always turn in the direction of the voice, and so I said to them, no, stay facing the front. Well, it was the best discipline management I ever had, because me being at the back talking to them, they didn't know where I was, so they didn't dare misbehave in case I was looking directly at them at any moment in time. And it was, try it out, it was a really useful thing. I didn't do it all the time, obviously. Teaching back of everybody's heads, not quite where we're going. But, you know, it was a really unexpectedly useful bit of information. So your body tensions will show up in your voice. Everything shows up in your voice. Your voice is a barometer for how you're feeling. It's a barometer for whether you're tired, or whether you're energized, whether you're excited, whether you're ill. It's a complete barometer, and we are programmed to take information from people's voices. Because early on, right back in caveman days, well, actually, our gesturing is another thing. Because before we could actually have sophisticated speech, we had gestures like big woolly mammoth behind you, run. You know, by the time you said that, it's too late. So gesturing, if I say to you to describe something very big, your voice will grow bigger and it will get lower in pitch. And if I ask you to describe something that's really tiny and small, your voice will actually go into a higher pitch and become tinier as you physically, and we can't get rid of that connection that we have. Our posture is really important because with that, well, actually, all of these end up being important. Because if your posture, and we're going to look at that again in a minute, if your posture is not helping your breath flow, then actually your voice is going to suffer. And also, the message that you give out may not necessarily be one of, I'm ready, are you? Let's go, let's do this lesson. Lack of breath flow comes from your posture as well. If you're running out of breath, you will be spending more air now than you've ever done when you're speaking at length, because your vocal cords are together longer because you're speaking slower. Every moment that I am talking to you, my vocal cords are coming together. The moments when I'm not, they're apart. Yours are apart for a lot of the time at the moment. They're about not to be, but they're apart. So it's literally that. Every sound I make, my vocal cords come together. That's a lot of vocal cord activity. If you're nervous, that's going to affect your voice. Your mentor walks in. It's like intake of breath, isn't it? And then sort of like, oh, you might be excited about them coming in, but even so, you'll still have a level of anxiety attached to that. And we all know what happens in anxiety with the adrenaline flow. And adrenaline goes straight to your voice. It goes straight to everywhere because it's trying to get you to get out of there. It's a fight or flight syndrome. And also, I suffered this early on. I'm quite good at winging it. So I would sometimes not prepare a lesson. It wasn't quite as regimented as it is now, but I would not prepare a lesson and I could get away with it. But actually, it was rubbish because I didn't have a direction. I went with what the students said back to me, and that was quite a dynamic shifting lesson. But overall, nobody really remembered anything about it, because I hadn't prepared it. And actually it made me a bit nervous. I sort of did it once too often and had a horrible lesson. 40 minutes of not knowing what I was doing, where I was taking the lesson, that feels like 40 hours. So, you know, preparation is key. Okay, it's time to use our voices. So I would like you first of all just to stand up and stand for me like a bored teenager. Up you get. Can move out if you want to, if it's too much. Move out to the side. Right, can you all stand like a bored teenager, please? That's well, some very good bored teenager looks going on. We've got people with hands on hips. Everybody has universally lost about 3 centimetres in height, and there's kind of a lot of this going on with the... In fact, that's like a truculent teenager rather than a bored one, but yeah, so what? Right, now come out of that. Just lift yourselves out of that. Oh, my God. Right, I wish you could see this. Well, you will on the video. What a fantastic look that is. That is good posture from most of you, unless you've got your head on one side. You need to think about this. Is your knees over your ankles, hips over your knees, just move your legs slightly apart, rib cage over your hips, or in line with your hips, and that'll make you go backwards slightly. Then your shoulders need to be over your rib cage. And this is the big one. Your head needs to be over your shoulders, so not forward like that. But neither does it need to, can't see everybody, neither does it need to be up. If you've got your chin up, actually that compromises your voice. Can you hear that? I'm going to lift my chin again and speak. I'm trying to speak louder. It's much harder for me to do. Can you hear that? So please notice if you are raising your chin to speak into a space. Just standing like this. I would like you now to turn to the person next to you or around you and just have a Zuzé conversation. This is where you go, Zuzá, you put a Z before the letter, before the vowel. Zuzá, say, Zuzá, anything you like, make it up. And can stop. Thank you. Thanks. So I'm going to clap my hands because it's something slightly different for your ears to hear, and you're just going to have to indulge me and go with that. Thank you very much. Right, now you should notice whether, because you were slightly at a distance, some of you, did it mean that you wanted to raise your chin to get the sound to the other person? So that's a point, isn't it? You didn't think about that. And the other thing is, did you take in a breath before you spoke? Possibly not. Some of you might have done. Most of us just talk with the residual air we've got in our lungs. So let's do that again. Can you move yourself slightly further apart from the person you're speaking to? If possible, you can use the other space. And can you continue your zouze? So now you're having to do it at a distance. Can you take a breath before you start, and a bit more operatic, a bit more Shakespearean? Zouza, zay, zee, zoo, zay. Off you go. You had your chin up. Zouze. Okay, that's something for you to think about. How often are you raising your chin in order to get that sound efficient? And what you're doing when you do that is that you're cutting off part of the throat. It's leaning, you're pulling your chin forward, so you're actually lessening the space through which the sound comes. Now, whilst you're also there, I want you to check out your breath control. When I say take a breath in, it's a bit of a misnomer that, but I just want you to open your throat and let the air drop into the bottom of your lungs. So put your hands on your rib cage and see if it moves when you take a breath in. I don't want shoulders up, okay? Open your throat, open your mouth, drop air in now. Okay, and get rid of it, and then do it again. Actually, not bad. I can see quite a lot of tense shoulders here. So get the shoulders down and relax, and just literally isolate your rib cage. You should feel great. We don't breathe properly at all. In fact, if you can't feel that, bend forward and put your hands on your back, and then breathe. And you'll notice that your rib cage moves. Just try that. Lean forward. Just where you are. Put your hands on your rib cage at the back. Lean quite far forward. Don't hit your head on the desk. That's what you have to do when you're upright. You have to have that feeling. That is going to give you the power. Particularly those of you who are doing PE, you want that more powerful voice because you're going to have to be talking into a distant space. Right, sit down. With your breath control, if you practice your breath control, you're going to power up your lungs and you're going to power up the whole mechanism. So what I'd like to do now is what I call leaky pipe. And this is where you literally go for as long as you can. Okay, so we're going to see who last person standing in, as it were. Yesterday everybody stayed standing, but we'll do it. So, you ready? Here we go. You're going to take a decent breath in, and then don't do this. Avoid this. Avoid going straight away, because that's you gone. You've used up all your breath. And then the other thing is try and make it even, so not like this. Okay, so off you go. Right, we're going to do it all together. Here we go. And when you can't do it any longer, stop. Don't keel over. It's very good. See, first sort of 20 seconds are easy. Then it starts to get into that slightly, I'm not sure about this, but I'll keep going. And then, yes, suddenly you're dialing out. Keep going, those of you who can. Well done. Maybe there was somebody who was a scuba diver yesterday. Anybody still going? Put your hand up. Yes, good. Keep going. Brass players, they're good. Are we done? Is somebody still going? You're going? Yes. Well done, that girl. Now, I know that sounds like so what, but actually you can improve that. So you can time yourselves for how long you can do that leaky pipe until you can't do it anymore. You'll never keel over on this because actually your brain will say, we need to take a breath now. So you'll stop and your lungs will take in a breath. If you want to take a really good lungful of air, the first thing you should do is breathe out and then take a breath in, because that shows you what your lung capacity can be. So actively breathing is really important. By the way, breath, the more I do this, the more I just come back to breath. Breath is really key because it's the fuel for the voice, and it also is a great thing to work on if you're nervous. So if you are nervous, actively count your breath. So count in for 5 and out for 10. The out breath always needs to be longer. Count in for 7, out for 11 or 16 or something. And that will calm you down. So if you're waiting for that interview or waiting to speak to your mentor or something, and you're a bit nervous about it or a bit anxious, this is brilliant for anxiety. Actually, forget that, it's brilliant for anxiety generally. I think anxiety can have a whole different level of sorting out if you all breathe properly. I'd put my head on the line on that. Breathing is massively important. I've read a book by a guy called James Nestor called Breath. And he goes round the world looking at people who can hold their breath for a long time, looking at the health of the body. Apparently, we are all mouth breathers now. It's partly to do with historically how we've developed as people. But really, we should be breathing through our noses as much as possible. Your nose has the filter for breath, takes out all those particles. And actually, he did an experiment where for 10 days, he had his nose taped up so he could only breathe through his mouth. He did it with a friend. Then he had for the next 10 days, he had his mouth taped up and he could only, did I say that? Yeah, and could only breathe through his nose. He was really ill when he couldn't breathe through his nose. He got all sorts of colds and coughs, and he actually felt terrible, and his whole body, all his readings started to go into decline. So the nose breathing's quite important. So you can do it whilst you're waiting, can't you? Breathe in for 5, out for 5. That's the balance that I took from that book. Right, tensions. We'd mentioned a little bit on tensions. And one of the places that I think I should mention to you that maybe has not been in your sight lines is that one of the places that holds a great deal of tension is your tongue. Now, you might not have thought about that, but it does. And we're going to prove that. So we're going to say together, I'm going to conduct it. We're going to say unique New York, New York's unique. And we're going to say it 3 times. You ready for that? Here we go. Unique New York, New York's unique. Unique New York, New York's unique. Unique New York, New York. Oh, a lot of New Norks and things in there, I think. Okay. Let's see if we can improve that. Inside your mouth, make a compass. North, south, west, east. And you're going to, it doesn't matter about the west, east, but stick your tongue inside your mouth, on the roof of your mouth, really hard for north. Here we go. South. West, that's west for me, east, west, south, north, east, north, west, north, south, and north again really hard. Now clean your teeth with your tongue. Now something I was reminded about that I forgot to do yesterday. You're going to write your name in the air with the tip of your tongue, like this. Believe it or not, that was Janet. You're not going to do this. Okay? We are trying to isolate just the tongue. So off you go. And if you've got a short name, you have to do it twice. Right, so stick your tongue out, off you go, write your name in the air. Hey, good. Oh, you're good at this. Can you feel your tongue? Well done, well done. Now I want you to put the tip of your tongue behind your bottom teeth. This looks disgusting. I apologise to the front people. And you're going to roll your tongue out like this, but keep it at the bottom, behind your bottom teeth. Okay? As far as you can go. That's the blade of your tongue. Then you're going to make it concave inside, so you know where it goes. You might gag at this point, so just watch that one. Okay, so now you're going to alternate. You're going to go out and then in. See how fast you can do that. Okay, clean your teeth. Okay, off we go again. Unique New York. Here we go. Unique New York, New York's unique. Unique New York, New York's unique. Unique New York, New York's unique. I thought that sounded better personally. Improvement? That is how much tension you have in your tongue. And at the end of the day, sometimes when you talk and you go blah, like that, you know, when your tongue feels too big for your mouth, that's because it's tense. So if you can do a few I mean, I don't suppose you want to do them in front of your students, although it could be something, the surprise exercise that they end up doing, because their voices are terrible, some of them. You know, it's all the way through, people are misusing their voice, so they could learn some of this too. Now let me give you my go-to exercise, which comes from speech therapy, which will help you if your voice is feeling tired. It'll help you know whether your voice is okay or not. And it's really the go-to exercise to improve your voice and to improve the tone range of your voice. So some of you might know this. It's called the NG exercise, or sirening is what it sometimes gets called, but it's nothing to do with going E-or, E-or. So the word lung, this is what you're going to look at. Lung, you're going to sit on the Can you just say lung for me? Lung. And you should feel the sound sitting a little bit behind your nose. In fact, you can put your hands there and go lung, and it should be buzzing. You feel that? Okay. Right, can I borrow yourself, please? Oh, Lord. No, he says.
Or do you stand up?
Yes, I do. I want you right out here. But don't worry, because you're not going to do all the work. Okay. I am. He's like relieved, isn't he? Okay, right, you're going to face me. I can move this sound through my vocal range. And this is a really good indicator, and it might be tired, so I'd be interested to see what happens. Okay, good. So you are now going to conduct me and tell me when I'm going to go high, middle, or low. So you're literally going to do this. Okay. So we'll start middly, then you take me high, middle, low, well, whichever way you want to go. If you can go from high to low or whatever. So it's your choice, okay? We'll take a breath in. You laugh, you're going to do this in a minute. Right. Okay, right, here we go. And start me in the middle.
Middle there.
Okay, right, thank you very much. Okay, now, obviously I'm used to doing that. Yesterday, somebody went to me, okay, I can do that, I can do it. However, the idea is that actually you want to just make sure that you're learning how to do this first. So you shouldn't feel it in your throat, because what's happened is your vocal cords are together and it's everything sits in your nasal pharynx now. There's a little thing called the velar port, which is shut off, so it's just there. I use that as a warm-up for my singing, by the way. Etc. I don't sing that song, but you know, you can use it in all sorts of ways, because there is no extra subglottal pressure underneath the vocal cords, which means it's safe. If your voice is wrecked and hurting, this is the safest exercise you will ever have to do, because it will give you sound as well. So you're actually getting tone quality on it. So you can guess this now. You're going to be in pairs, and each one of you is going to take it in turns, and you're going to have a go at conducting each other. You might want a little bit of space. And then swap over. Off you go. Here we go.
I feel I need to stand up.
You don't have to stand, but it's easier to stand, yeah.
Can you make a noise?
Come on, who's going first? Are you two? Come on then, here we go. Lung, say it, lung, say lung. Oh, good. Swap over, keep swapping round. That's middly, start middly. So think, okay. Say lung, say the word lung to start it. Lung. There you are. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Of course, it does help if you have a sense of pitch. So if somebody's going like this and you're going, you might need to work on that. But the point about having the sense of pitch is that you're stretching the chords. When you go higher, the chords stretch. Actually, the larynx tilts forward and it allows the chords to stretch. And actually, how high you can sing, and it's always going to be higher than you think it is, but how high you can sing is directly related to the size of your larynx and the stretch. And interestingly, because it's fascinating for me, there's a bit in the larynx around the hyoid bone where there's a tilt that happens. So if your vocal cords are here and this front piece of bone tilts forward, that's the bit that tilts. And people who choose to be singers and who are professional singers or who sing really well have a slightly bigger gap here when they're born, and that stays throughout the rest of their lives, than people who can't. So if you have a bigger gap, you get more tilt. So you can sing higher and lower, you've got more range. That's a physiological advantage that singers are born with, in case you wondered. So now if you say to somebody, no, I can't sing, I've only got a little gap, you've got a reason to say. Okay, here's a question. Why can't dogs talk like people? Talking's complicated. The brain of a dog is not sophisticated enough. They could if somebody was patient enough to do lots of training. Dogs don't have vocal cords, or they can't get enough air sucked into their lungs. You've got 5 seconds just to faites la choix. Make your choice. I'm afraid it's A. Talking's way too complicated. Dogs can make noises. They do have vocal cords. They can get enough air. They can go for miles walking and running. They've got plenty of air capacity. But it's just that in order for you to even make a sound, let alone the content of what you say, 100 muscles, between 70 and 100, have to start functioning together and coordinating. It's a good job we can't isolate all of those muscles because we would be here all day. So, you know, thankfully you can do a couple of things which galvanize those muscles, and that is one of them. So how many vocal cords do you have then? 2, 70, you can do lots with the voice. 2, 17, 4, 11. 2. And there they are. So get over your distaste. Those are my vocal cords, so don't you dare say anything horrible about them. You can see there, the only way I could have that picture taken was either where they put a laryngoscope, which is a long, stiff rod, at his tongue, and stick it to the back of your throat, and of course you've got a gag reflex. You go, as a singer, I can make that space, but it's not comfortable. I much prefer the nasal camera, in fact. So those are the vocal cords, the white things. Those are working perfectly well there. There's nothing wrong with those vocal cords. To the side of them is two little bits of fleshy bit, which are the false vocal folds. And when you actually talk and you get very straight, that's the vocal fold, the false vocal folds coming in and stopping your true vocal folds work. So if you're somebody who talks in quite a tight way all the time like this, actually you've got your false vocal folds very much in play, and that's stopping your voice have its full potential. So you need to look at that. If you're feeling tight in your throat, you need to address that. This is the epiglottis at the bottom. It's not my tongue, although the base of your tongue goes right here. If you do that, you can feel the base of your tongue. It's underneath your chin. Stick your tongue out. Like that. That's your tongue. It's a very long muscle. The epiglottis stops food going down into your lungs, because this is at the top of your lungs, because of course it's the airflow. And then these are the various cartilages. Here they are, not my vocal cords, in action. That's how they work. So it looks like there's a gap. That's strobed, that's under incredible slowdown. Very moist. I'll tell you something in a minute. That's the only thing you'll take away from this session when I tell you. That's going down the trachea into the lungs. That's a healthy set of vocal cords working away, very hydrated. As I went higher, did you see that? It just stretched slightly. It went slightly longer. Looks like there's a gap, but you can just see it fluttering on the edge there. This is very strobed down. So if you're singing an A, they're coming together at 440 times a second, or a rotation. I'm talking over this because we're about to see some vocal cords that are very unhealthy. And can you see the difference on those vocal folds? There's two little bumps there. They are cysts or nodules. That's what a nodule looks like. It comes from the inside. This person cannot sustain a sound. It's breathy and husky. You get like that if you've got a cold a bit sometimes, because there's loads of mucus sitting there. But that's more serious. They would not be able to go, hi! They would go, hi! There'd be a gap. And if you take you back to the that's how you can tell if your vocal cords are working well together. Because if you do this and this happens, that means your vocal cords is a gap. There's nothing happening in that moment. They're not coming together. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you've got nodules. It takes a lot to get to that stage. You basically have to ignore this session. You'd have to not take any notice. You'd not have to do any exercises. You'd just have to yell, and you just have to keep going with your voice even though it feels badly. Then you're on your way. Be quite good. So you don't want to get to that stage, because then you have to come back from it. And it takes you much longer to get to a bad voice. It takes you the same amount of time, but you don't realise how long it is to come back from it. So what do? Well, this is when I start to monitor my voice. This is my amber and red, my traffic light system. If it's feeling husky, or if I feel a bit dry, if I'm clearing my throat quite a bit, if I've lost some range in my voice, so I can't do that. Or if my voice aches when I'm trying to talk, well, that doesn't necessarily mean there's anything horribly wrong. It means that your voice is tired. It means you need to do a bit more of the and maybe zouzé, because that's a nice exercise for the voice, just to keep it coming together gently. So you need to just start thinking, oh, maybe I'll just give them lots of things to do and I won't talk quite as much over them. This is when you need to take it seriously. If you have aching muscles after you've spoken, that's all those other bits trying to keep your vocal cords together. They can do that, but it's not the right muscles doing the work. Hoarseness, which doesn't disappear after 2 weeks. Voices recover fantastically. You do not want to be hoarse after 2 weeks. Go to the doctor. If your speech is just more, you just don't fancy talking. It's all little messages that are coming from the throat to the brain saying, please don't make me talk, it's just knackering. Acid reflux, it's a big one. My husband had to give up singing because of his acid reflux. You don't want acid in, it's an alkali environment in the throat. Has anybody, do people here suffer? No, I won't ask you to say. But yeah, I mean, acid reflux is a big thing. You need to start looking at that and getting that, some extra things to help you with that. My friend's husband, he worked for Reckitt's and he invented Gaviscon Advance, and he says it's the extra peptide that helps with that. Okay, this is the final bit. How do I self-help? I get my head over a bowl of warm water if I'm feeling a bit and I just think that my vocal cords are like sticky and they're not moving properly. Actually, I put my head over the kettle after I've boiled it, not whilst I'm boiling it. But you know, you have to be careful. Breathe in through your mouth, out through your nose, or the other way around, so you go through that whole system. Acupressure. So I'm reliably informed that if you're getting a cold, or you're feeling a bit vocally compromised, that massaging this bit between your finger and your first thumb helps. Sterimar is do you know Sterimar? It's a salt water you stick up your nose. And actually that just helps clear out the system and clean your sinuses out. Don't make it up yourself unless you're a physicist. My husband, who was a singer, but he was also a physicist initially, he makes up his own solution of it, and it's disgusting. He's going like this over the sink. But anyway, the first thing I do is I reach for anti-inflams. Can I say now, I am over 60. I take nothing, no medication, absolutely zilch. So when I do take medication, it works. So I will use ibuprofen occasionally if I'm feeling a bit like I can just tell it's not quite right. The Benelin's there, not because it's Benelin particularly, but because it has a product called guaifenesin in it. And guaifenesin, it comes in 100 megs when they put it in things, makes your mucus more runny. So you know that time in a cold you get where you want to clear your throat and you can't even clear your throat, nothing moves. I mean, I didn't say this. You take the top off the bottle of the guaifenesin and you swig a bit, and you the Benelin, you go off, and that will help make your mucus runny. If I've got a concert and I'm feeling a bit I will do that. And then I start to move the mucus, and then I feel better. And if you're dehydrated, Diorolite or Electrolyte, any of those hydration powders that you use for babies, it also happens to be a fantastic cure for a hangover, I discovered. What do I avoid? I don't go anywhere near a vocal zone. Anything Olbas oil, they strip your mucal linings and they actually make your cold last longer. I mean, occasionally if you're in the real depths of it and it's awful, of course take a bit, but don't rely on them. Because they make you feel clear, but then your brain goes, we need to make more mucus because we want to be as it is down there. We want to make sure that we are watery, hydrated. So avoid those. Strepsils, okay, you know, to help. And some people suffer with making lots more mucus if they have dairy products. And finally, what does affect your voice? All these things we've been talking about. Who's listening? If your mentor's walked in, for example, or the head teacher, the audience that you're speaking to, where you're talking to them, the different environments. Different to be in a drama studio than in a lab or outdoors. Is your voice fit for purpose? Can you adapt it to all those different environments? If you're thinking, well, I'm still not sure I can, then you need to be doing some of these vocal exercises to strengthen your voice so that you have a fighting chance. I've put unhelpful substances there, but, you know. Here's my 5 top tips. Did you get that one? Lots of hydration. Make you go to the loo a bit more, but, you know. Oh, by the way, if you want to know if you're hydrated or not, check your pee. If it's not pale, you're not hydrated. Pee pale was what we were told as singers. Get your work-life balance, hard for you at the minute, sorted. Posture, honestly, that is going to be like a real game changer if you sort your posture out, especially this chin-raising business. If you overdo it, it's what you do afterwards that matters. So the next 2 or 3 days, you need to nurture and cherish your voice because it's an instrument and it's very robust, but at the same time, it needs help. And, you know, those other teachers, they'll get to you at some point. No, I mean, you get triggered sometimes. You don't know, do you, until you get in the classroom, how on earth you're going to behave under stress. It's one of the most stressful environments. So you need to learn a little bit about that. And this is the reason. You can't go and get another voice. That's it. What you've got now is what you've got for life. You've got your adult voices now. All the changes have happened. This is it. But you have to work really hard to get voice dysfunction. Okay, next session after lunch, we're going to be talking about how you can be effective in the way you present yourself in the classroom. Anybody got any questions? I'm around. You can come and chat to me, although I would like a moment to have a sandwich or something. But, you know, I'm available for talking. Okay, well done. How long have you got? Till about 1:20, I think. So I'm going to do you a quick half-hour whiz through this, okay? Again, just be present, because after all, this is what this is about, presence. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist the silly image there. So we know what presence is, because when we come across it, we kind of just go, yeah, got that, know what that's about. But actually being that person yourself, how do we do that? How do we engage that? Can we actually arrive at a sort of charismatic state from nowhere? Well, the answer is there are certain things that people with presence consistently do, and that's what I'm going to show to you now. And you might want to try out 2 or 3 of these things if you don't do them already. Actively try. That's the thing about today. It's that you can receive all this sort of and listen to it and go, yeah, okay, that's interesting. But there's loads of stuff in both of these sessions that if you take them and try little bits out, it's going to make a difference because you're not doing the same old, same old. And that's what people with presence do. They're always changing things around. We're going to look at the factors. We're going to talk about language because the words that you use to the people who receive them is hugely impactful. And I think you can probably realise that anyway, just as I say that. But we're going to look at some of the words that it would be great if you could remove from your vocabulary. Really tricky to do, I'll admit it. And then my final bit, I'm looking at emotional intelligence. Because everything you do in the classroom is about emotions. A classroom is stuffed full of emotions from you and from your students. And if you run scared from that or you don't recognise that, you'll always struggle to actually get on top of the classroom behaviour. So we know what it is when we encounter it. Often people full of presence are actually quite open and smiley. As you will see, there used to be a thing in training which used to say, never smile before Christmas. And I'm like, what is that about, you know? Is that supposed to make you more impactful when you do smile after Christmas? The beneficence of you giving a smile to somebody. It's just a power game. So, you know, be your nice, open, smiley selves, just like you are now. The physical characteristics of somebody with presence. Now, I took these images, and they're a little bit rubbish because I took them from Teachers TV. They're not rubbish because they came from Teachers TV, that's just their screen grabs. And this was obviously an older teacher, but very experienced. He's teaching drama, in fact. And one of the things that people with presence do is they sort of create space around them, and then they move into it. So it's not like they keep a distance from you. That's power. Power is about keeping a distance from you. Presence is about shortening that distance, but yet still having a sort of bubble in which you move around. Gesture is really key. Gesture actually underlines what you're saying. If you're getting really enthusiastic about something, you'll find yourself, your voice will rise in pitch, you'll get faster, and you'll gesture. You can't help yourself do it. It goes right back to Neanderthal times when, you know, as I said, woolly, you know, mammoth, get out the way. So gesturing has become hardwired in with speech in our brains. And here, for example, he's using his hand, he's a bit like a conductor. Somebody wants to say something here, but somebody else is talking. So just for a minute, you say to them, I've got you, I'm coming back to you, but I want to let this person talk first. They've got the floor, but I'm coming back to you. And he's just holding it. You probably see people, you may even do that yourself without realizing it. Then you give them the floor, and then somebody else interrupts you going, hang on, I'm coming to you. And people, the students quite like that because it also means that they've been acknowledged and they kind of know where the pathway of the conversation is going, who's taking turns. And everything you do is about helping people with the skills that they're going to take from your classroom into the world. And they'll be watching you for how you deal with the world, how you deal with the microcosm of the world in the classroom. So I did watch Rishi Sunak day before yesterday talking about the post office scandal. And if you can get back to the BBC News just to see that clip, I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. So he was standing in front of people and he was gesturing for England. He was super gesturing. And then he was telling you, it's like me saying, well, now what we're going to do is I'm going to talk to you about. I was like, stop, 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 stop. All I could see was his gesturing and his movements. He just, for some reason, he just completely lost it. I think he must have been nervous. And so actually, over-gesturing can be an indication of when you're nervous and you're doing something with your hands. A very open stance means that you're very visibly comfortable because you're not closing off from people by folding your arms or twiddling with something in front of you. You know, King Charles and people, you know, they're always fiddling with their cufflinks when they get out of the cars. Have you noticed that? And that's a sort of gesture of, I'm slightly nervous here and I'm just protecting myself. So we get that. We may not be able to voice it in those terms, but we understand that somebody's not feeling totally comfortable. So just an open stance. And you have to practice it sometimes because you feel vulnerable. When you're this open, that's very vulnerable, especially when you're on stage. And I give it to you that actually at the front of the classroom or wherever, you are kind of actors on a stage. I once said that and somebody came up to me afterwards and said, told me off, one of the trainees, this is years ago, and said, I just think it's terrible that you're telling people to act. He said, I want to be a real person. I'm like, do you know what, I'm not telling you to act. It depends what you think acting is. But acting is in fact being as real as possible. Really strong, truthful acting is about taking your truth and putting it there. Acting as if, becoming the person. Eye gaze. Everybody here should feel that I've looked at them at least once today. And if I was teaching now, if I was a student now, the place that I would sit so that I could be as naughty as possible would be at the front. Because 9 times out of 10, teachers are always checking the back of the room and just over those little corners for everybody who thinks they can get away with it. But you get away with far more at the front, don't you? Yes. So, you know, you can be on your phone, you can be doing all sorts of things. The teacher won't have noticed. So your job is to scan the room and make sure you take in the sides. I was working with a teacher in a school in North London, and it wasn't going very well, not from this cohort, not going very well. And the deputy head had to come in I was sitting at the back thinking, oh, I'm so dying to get up and sort the class out, but it wasn't my job. And then the deputy head came in, she went like this, she went, I thought, what is she doing? But actually their rule was that if you are looking at me and I've got every single gaze, then I know you're listening. I'm not sure that's true actually, but at least they felt that. Everybody was at least not misbehaving then. So that was one of their things. So you can use your eye gaze quite powerfully. Gaining rapport is really important, isn't it? It's going to be such hard work in a class if you don't have your students on side. So I'm a great one for gaining some rapport with them, calling them by their names very early on. Learn their names. Even if you only learn 3 or 4 initially, as soon as you can, start using names. Keep your gestures open, as we've talked about, your eye contact, and then make sure that your face is interesting to look at. We're really rubbish at knowing what our faces are doing. We think they're doing one thing, only to discover they're doing that. So actually what I used to do, and what I still do, is that if I want to practice a talk, I will practice it in front of the mirror. That's not me being narcissistic. That is me checking that what I'm saying and how I'm saying it is actually aligning with what I want it to look like and sound like. Getting somebody to film you, that's more tricky these days, but you know, if somebody could actually film you teaching, that would be a real eye-opener for you. And you'd realise 9 times out of 10 you have to do more and put more on your face than you think you do. So practice facial expressions in front of the mirror. This was a very interesting study done in 1997. I'm sorry that I keep putting things at the bottom of slides and I'm not sure everybody can see them at the back. And Jean Ruddock, I think she's at Cambridge University now, they looked at what characteristics make students want to learn. And I thought these were very interesting, so I'm just sharing them with you. I think if you are somebody who doesn't like young people, I don't know why you're in this room. Okay? Or if you don't like other people full stop, you're going to have a difficulty. Oh. Okay, so it says enjoys teaching students and actually enjoys teaching the subject. You know, I hope you've chosen subjects that you really love, because if you don't, you've got an uphill battle. We can tell. I can tell if you don't love your subject and you're trying to tell me something important about it. We all can. We're all hardwired into looking out for that. So your passion and even if it's a really boring bit of the subject, because all subjects have some bits that are less interesting than others, get fascinated by it, because your fascination and your love of it will mean that you will always try and teach it in a slightly different way too. So don't just think after your first year of teaching, got my lessons sorted, done a year's teaching, in the drawer for next year, because actually every class receives things slightly differently, and you will get bored if you teach your lesson exactly the same way every time. I don't do this exactly the same way every time. I have the same content, but for my sake and for your sake, I change it around a bit. In the exercises we did, I did them in a totally different order than I did yesterday. They make life lessons interesting and link them to things outside school. That's a really good one for gaining rapport with students, actually. Shows you that you're interested in them. So if somebody's like, you know, follows something football team and they've just lost or something, you can be sympathetic. You might not be empathetic, because your team might have been the team that beat them, but you can be sympathetic to your students. You can link things. See how much you can do that. You're really blue sky thinking out of the box. Easy for students to talk with, yes. Why wouldn't you be? You don't have to be their best friends. That's a mistake you sometimes make early on in teaching. But actually, being open to be talked to, yes, that's fine. Doesn't shout. So students prefer people who don't shout, but of course there are moments where you have to be more forceful or more powerful in the classroom and to gain control. But you should never stay in that mode. So you come back to that balanced voice I was talking about earlier. And you can have a laugh. The great thing about secondary school teaching, of course, is that the students are at a stage where they can be quite witty and you can get some really fantastic repartee. I mean, I used to just laugh out loud sometimes at some of the things my students said, even if they were being a little bit off task and saying something in order to get me off task. But, you know, I'd go with it sometimes because it was amusing. Fair, everybody has a very strong fair gauge. And they will watch you and see how you deal with different situations and how fair you're being. So consistency and you knowing what you expect from your students and then reproducing that fairness, that's all part of your presence, your being in the classroom. Don't go on about how much better another class is or compare them with a cleverer brother or sister or something. Of course, it's fine to say something like, okay, the last class did this maths puzzle. They got to the end of this and they found the solution in 3 minutes. Go. They'll love that. But not if you consistently say, you know, their behaviour is just so much better than yours. I don't know, you're just, every time I have to talk to you like this. You feel like, well, she's ganging up on us, and I feel like I don't want to really engage with you, and you're losing it straight away. You have got to be bigger than everything. This is where your skills as a teacher come in. Explains things, goes through things so that everybody understands, and, you know, it doesn't matter, there's no such thing as a silly question. Actually tries to help each student. That is your job as well. How wonderful, I don't know whether you've had this experience yet, but when you've really had to work hard with a student and suddenly you see it click, you see the light bulb goes on. It's such a fantastic feeling. They feel great, you feel great because you have made that difference. And I hope that's why you're here, because you want to make that difference. And this one breaks my heart. I see so many students where people give up on them. Maybe not in the classroom, maybe everybody else in their life has given up on them. Well, hey, you are a safe space and you are creating an environment and you don't give up on them. And there's all manner of stories about people who will say, the teacher, I would not be doing what I'm doing today were it not for Mr. So-and-so. And he believed in me when nobody else did. Introduce you to a lady called Patsy Rotenberg. Patsy Rotenberg is Australian, but she works over here. She works with the Royal Shakespeare Company at RADA. She is the go-to vocal coach for all of the great actors, the Judi Denches, the Ian McKellens, the Helen Mirrens, everybody who's gone through those places. She works at Guildhall, funnily enough. And I'm reading a book of hers at the minute called Circles of Presence. I'm rereading it. In there, she says, if you remember a performance days after experiencing it, it means that the performers were present and you were present receiving it, or something like that, receiving their work. And I thought, God, that's just like being in the classroom. If you remember a lesson days after it was taught, it means that you were really in that moment listening to it, and that the teacher was also in the moment, being present. And how fantastic is that? And you will get moments where people say to you, oh, I remember when we did that lesson on such and such. So different elements, or we're bringing them all together. What is presence? Eye contact, facial expression, gesture, voice. We've done quite a bit on this morning. And your posture is part of it. If you go into a classroom and you're like this, first of all, that doesn't, well, it looks, you know, doesn't look like you're that interested. It's not great for your voice anyway. If you go in, always with a positive attitude. Now, that's a really tricky thing for me to say. How can you, if you've had a really horrible day, something catastrophic happening to you, you are not going to be in the mood. And then every little thing that happens in the classroom, and you've probably had this already, will trigger you. But you know what? If you can just find the capacity and the resilience to park what is going on for you personally at the door, because, believe it or not, every single person in the room has things going on for them personally, some of which may be quite devastating. And in a way, your job is to lead people towards what you're trying to do in the lesson, yourself included. It'll help you, actually. I'm not saying forget it. I'm not saying forget what's going on. I'm not just saying gaslighting it or something. But there's a way of managing that and appropriate times to look at things. And the classroom, for you and for your students, needs to be a really positive place. So, I won't say anything else about eye contact. We've done that. I quite liked this graphic of posture as we get to the to modern times, how we're all getting hunched up again over a computer. That's me gesturing away. Now, you know I said that there were 6 voice patterns that are universal. There are 6 facial expressions that are universal, and these are they. Bizarrely, disgust is in there. Every single culture will understand, does the same things with their nose and their face for disgust. They wrinkle up their nose, they curl their upper lip, narrow their eyes. Yeah, that's it, you got doing it well there. So disgust, sort of like, no. And I wonder if it's just an evolution thing that if that food is off, you'll be poisoned if you eat it. So it's useful to have disgust, maybe. I don't know. If anybody's got any ideas, do let me know. So many of these things, psychologists know about these all the time. So they got asked for their advice and they made this film. Disney Pixar went and asked all the top psychologists about how it is, how we grow up, what it's like when things change for us, how we manage our emotions. If you want to ignore what I've said and just go and watch that's absolutely fine. That will take you through. It was on this Christmas, actually. But it's really worth. The one thing they haven't got one of them there. Let's see which one they've got. They've missed one out. But those are the see, disgust is in there. Here's my language choice. These are the words that allegedly we can try and remove from our vocabulary. Now, I know that if I am around people, if I'm starting to feel negative and it's like somebody's draining me, chances are they're using these words. Don't, should, ought, can't. But you can't do it like that. You really should get your homework in on time. You ought to be arriving in the lesson at the very start. It's very easy to fall into that trap, isn't it? Don't forget to do your homework. Actually, the brain doesn't understand the difference. So it really kind of processes the word forget there, apparently. So my challenge to you, and I still don't succeed in doing it, is to try and try means that you might not, is to remove these words as much as is possible from your vocabulary. Certainly catch yourself out. The rest of today, tomorrow, listen to yourself and to other people. Just make it a moment that you think, oh, are they saying these don'ts, shoulds, coulds? And actually you'll find that they make you feel rather down. Reframing your question, that's a thing from NLP, how to reframe something. So instead of it being all negative, turn it on its head and make it a positive. So instead of saying, don't forget to do your homework, you could say, it takes a bit longer, but you could say something like, I'm really looking forward to seeing the work that you do tomorrow when you hand it in. And that gives a possibility. It also sends the message out that there's nothing about it. I'm expecting you to do that work, but I'm not asking you to forget it in any way, shape or form. So just, it's a small thing to do. It'll grow huge dividends. 5 things that people consistently do when they've got presence is they move slowly, actually. They move with their balanced voice. They tend to smile more. So there are times when you might have to move fast. But generally speaking, if you're being the authority in the room, you're very still. And you might gesture, but you move slowly. You focus on individuals. So really interested in what every person has to bring to the table. And you are aware of other people. Always that alert, being aware, what's going on? Has everybody's eyes glazed over? Are they sitting there looking bored? Time to change the energy, time to move. These are how you go through a lesson. And which brings me to my final bit, which is about emotions. And these people, William and Okan Kusama Powell, actually he died a couple of years ago, they wrote a book several years ago called, which I have, that's my book, Becoming an Emotionally Intelligent Teacher. So you see, I was always quite interested in it, even years ago. And I love this phrase, this is true, Emotions are at the heart of every lesson. Jealousy, boredom, excitement, anger, all of these things are going on. How on earth, if you're not aware of those, are you going to manage that in your classroom? And until you get on top of understanding about that, behaviour issues will always rear their head. So I'm just going to take you through, finally, a lesson, and I'm going to add some of the pillars of emotional intelligence in there. So, whatever your emotional state is when you're planning your lesson will affect kind of how easy it is to do it or how effective it's going to be. The environment where you're working, if you're constantly being interrupted whilst you're planning your lessons, which I'm sure some of us have been over time, it's like, oh, I can't concentrate. The goals that you're setting, your active preparation, this all comes under the skills of self-awareness. You're going to become very aware of yourself, how you operate, the things that you can do best. Then the first 5 minutes, if you haven't got everybody in the first 5 minutes of the lesson, you will spend the next 20 trying to get them on side. Isn't that true? So the first 5 minutes, if you can organise that and gain that rapport and have a steady state of emotions, not up and down, depends where your students are coming from. They might be coming from a lesson where they've been on the ceiling and they come into your room. We've all had that, I think. And then you've got to kind of get them to a stage where they can be receptive. How you greet and look and listen to everybody. Have these little conversations as they're coming in. Say, God, did you see Liverpool won last night? Yes. And then somebody else is going, no, I hate that. Doesn't matter. Just have these conversations. The emotional temperature, you suss out the emotional temperature of the room and get it to a steady place where you can. And I talked a little bit about putting baggage at the door, and you can help your students do that as well. So this is now the skills, the social skills that you possess. So next set of skills that you need to be aware of. Well, in the middle of the lesson, you're adapting all the time to the situation. You are reacting to what's going on with students. And you're trying to motivate and persuade them. That actually takes the most energy, doesn't it? But, you know, that's where the heart of the lesson is. That's going to affect everything that comes afterwards. And as I said, you're leading them away from one set. Maybe they're all quite negative, going, I can't do this, sir, miss, whatever, I can't do this. And you're going to lead them from the state of can't to possible. And that's really important, that you find some skills that allow you to take your students, all of them, through that stage. And this is all about you regulating yourself and being empathetic with your students. So already we've got 3 things in that are very strong in emotional intelligence. About the end of the lesson, you want to encourage a work ethic. You want that homework in. You want them to go and think about what you've done and to reflect on it. You're planning ahead. Maybe you're summarising what you did and saying next week we're going to build on this bit of scaffolding. We're building on this into the next phase of our lesson, of our topic. This is about motivation. Motivation is an emotional skill, an emotional intelligence skill. And finally, I like this guy, David Caruso. He developed the Yale... America are very much ahead of us on this curve. They're way ahead of the curve. And I love this quote. See, emotional intelligence is not the opposite of intelligence. It's not the triumph of the heart over the head. It's the unique intersection of both. That's real emotional intelligence. And when you're starting to think and evaluate your lessons and looking back, really important skill that, you're reflecting and you're evaluating. These are all core skills. So here's my little resources board. And as I say, I will make a PDF and let you see it. Teachers TV, it's really ancient now, but I just thought it was fantastic. It came up with some brilliant things. I mean, it is dated, so as you look at it, you'll be going, well, but it's all about behaviour management. They've got things about modern foreign language teaching, about music teaching, about skills in the classroom, about presence, about language. Teachers TV is all on YouTube, just shove it in. Check out Times Ed, can be quite useful for some resources as well. Sometimes have very good articles in there. These books, I don't know whether you've come across the pocket books. So they were a management book series initially, and now they brought out several years ago a teacher's version. So, well, you can see, that's just a small array of them. Go and have a look at them because they're really bite-sized, and you can sort of go through and go, oh yes, that's really good. And the other one is The Teaching Voice by Stephanie Martin and Lynn Darnley. They're both voice coaches and they work with the Shakespeare Company. And I went to when they launched their book, I went to that. I've written one subsequently, but it's slightly different focus. And I was already doing my stuff when I went to theirs. I was just looking at the competition, really. This is a great name, Swedish-American guy who's really into voice and the science of voice. And he's set up the Voice Academy. You don't have to pay to go and see it. And it's a virtual school for vocal health. You can go in and you can just wander through the rooms and click on, it's very interactive. You can click on things and up pop some information. It's a good one-stop place, I would say. Patsy, if you're interested in her, I'm reading her Right to Speak. She just bought one out called The Woman's Voice. And then there's this really excellent place, really fantastic, called Talking Voice. And this is my website. I have some exercises that you can download, well, you pay for them, of course, but they're downloadable, one track at a time if you want. I've written my book, Talking Teachers, and e-Qualitas have, or they used to have anyway, they're still in a cupboard somewhere. They bought about 8 of them at one point, and they are available if you want to, when you've got headspace, if you want to have a read of them. I was going to read you something out of it, but I've not no time now. And finally, I love this quote right back from 1890, William James, the brother of Henry James, the novelist. Smooth the brow, brighten the eye, contract the dorsal, as in your back, so lift from your back, rather than the ventral aspect of the frame. Speak in a major key. I love that. Speak in a major key. Pass the genial compliment, and your heart must be frigid indeed if it do not gradually thaw. So there's a final tip for positivity in the classroom. As much as you can bring to it, you might be the light in somebody's life, amongst your students. And if that doesn't make you emotional, I don't know what will. Thank you.